maybe you care, maybe you don't, but ESPN has found a way to once again put the SEC over Ohio State. The Football Power Index, the first one of the year, is out. Ohio State ranks 4th in overall FPI with a score of 23.8. That's behind Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. But they're 3rd in a lot of the other categories, Stefan. In fact, they're tied for 1st with the Texas Longhorns for the highest win total, projection at 10.4. Their playoff chances at 70.6. That's 2nd behind Texas and Georgia. And their national championship chances are 11.6. That's also behind Texas and Georgia. They're one of 4, I believe, Big Ten teams in the top 20 of these ratings. Why do we care? Why are we doing a video on this?
Well, because perception is reality a lot of the time. And I think, or I should say perception affects reality. So it feels like reality at times. And the Texas thing, I think, kind of is what it is with them at number 1. I think we both think that they have a really good roster. We'll see what happens at quarterback, but they have all the pieces in place to compete for a national title. And, they were arguably the team that came closest to competing with Ohio State on their run to a national title last year. So I don't think many people have gripes with where Texas is in these rankings. Georgia, they're a program that probably still gets some benefit of the doubt, even from the computers. With their recent success under Kirby Smart last year, obviously not too impressive, but still won the SEC, had your starting quarterback get hurt, and you were still in the mix in the college football playoff. Alabama entering the mix is where it gets a little bit interesting for me. I'm not really sure what you see from Alabama and what they did last year that gives you a ton of confidence. Where I struggle to see the overlaps of why Ohio State is as low as number 4 in these rankings is ESPN also does their SP Plus rankings, and they did a set of rankings after the spring, and SP Plus takes into account recent history, recent recruiting, and returning production. Ohio State doesn't have a ton of returning production, yet they're number 1 in the SP Plus rankings. And then you look at the FPI and you're wondering how are they at number 4? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I understand if you're looking at Ohio State's roster and you're telling yourself, well, they're losing a ton, then there should be a bit more correlation between those two things. So I struggle to see why Ohio State is as low as they are, or at least why they're below Alabama. That's where my biggest question is of what the Crimson Tide are doing right now that's giving people so much confidence after a year in which they just lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, to not great SEC teams last year. You're muted, Steven.
I mean,
there was a great point loading.
I know. Well, you can see it. You can see it just baking. Well, they were number 1 in the SP Plus because they have the 2 best players in the country.
Yep.
And they're the reigning national champions. That's why they were number 1 there. To be honest with you, I'm not shocked that Ohio State's not number 1. But I am shocked that Penn State's not number 1. Because their formula is literally the Ohio State-Michigan formula of, hey, what if we just bring everybody back? Then what? Oh, yeah, and they also have Ohio State's defensive coordinator from last year. Right? But especially since when you look at the top 4 teams ahead of Penn State in this, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State, all of them are breaking in new starting quarterbacks. Now, people think Arch Manning might be awesome. People think Julian Sand might be awesome. Gunnar Stockton and Ty Simpson are up next. It seems like at Georgia and Alabama, though Georgia a little bit more firm, while Alabama, it's either going to be him or Austin Mack, who followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington. But the top 5, there's only one team who has 0 questions about its quarterback play in terms of floor. Now, ceiling, if you want to tell me that Texas and Ohio State's quarterbacks have a higher ceiling than Penn State's quarterback, I'm with you. I can get around that. They have 5-star dudes who are at programs that are known for developing quarterback play, especially with who their head coaches are. But if we're going off the floors right now, which is all we can do, we haven't seen them play football, I'm a little shocked that Penn State's not number 1, because I'm all for putting as much pressure on James Franklin to get the job done as possible in 2025. But I agree with you. I don't know what's pulling Ohio State's FPI down when its first in projected wins, along with Texas. Its playoff chances are higher than Alabama's, and its national championship chances are higher than Alabama's. So why are the other 3 numbers higher than Alabama, but then the overall score is not higher than Alabama, when both of these teams lost a healthy amount of talent to the NFL. Now, no one lost as much talent as Ohio State did. They had 15 guys get drafted to the NFL of the 17 they sent to the draft.
14,
But
17.
14 and 7. I forgot. Seth McLaughlin didn't get drafted because he tore his Achilles. He probably would have gotten drafted. So 14 guys drafted. A 15th guy probably would have gotten drafted if he was fully healthy. So I get that, why they're not number one. I get why you pull them down. I just don't understand why Alabama's above. That's the one that I think fans are probably going to have the biggest nitpick with, because then it starts to seem like, oh, it's ESPN. They're SECing it once again.
Yeah, and it's funny because you do hear that. I mean, these are like computer generated rankings, so it's like there really shouldn't be any bias in this. I really hope that there isn't. These are just like, this is where these discussions get so aggravating sometimes, because these are the things that the SEC points to when they talk about being the superior conference. And like, whether you think SEC teams or Big Ten teams are better, like if you think Alabama's going to be better than Ohio State, Penn State, like I don't care. Like the opinion stuff is fine. Like Steven, when you do the AP top 25, a lot of that is your opinion, which team you think is better. If you put Penn State at number one, or if you put Bama ahead of Ohio, like that's not where I'm going to have the gripes with this. These formulas are just, this is what the SEC is pointing to as like objective, why the SEC is objectively better. And it just doesn't make sense. Like we could have the Bama Ohio State debate, but it's like A&M's at number 8. Auburn's at number 14. South Carolina's at 15. Oklahoma's at 16. Florida 18. Arkansas 22. Missouri 23. SEC has a ton of teams in the top 10. While the Big Ten, you have Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon 4, 5, 6, and then Michigan enters at 17. USC's at 19. Nebraska's at 25. Which you could make that argument on the Big Ten side of like, should a team like Nebraska or USC been in this conversation? Like that's its own thing. But the SEC is pointing to this FPI and saying, look at all these teams we have in the top 25. Tell me how Auburn or Oklahoma should be higher in any rankings that are based on numbers, which let's take the numbers from last year. How are those teams going to be better than Indiana or Illinois, who I don't know how they didn't make, with everything that they have returning, especially at quarterback, how they didn't make the top 25? Or even look at Iowa last year in the FPI finished above Auburn, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Like, say what you will about Iowa, they're consistently better than teams like Auburn, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And that's where this perception comes in, is you get to the playoff and you're saying, should this team get in or this team get in? And automatically you say, well, the SEC is better. Look at the FPI rankings. Well, okay, let's look at those rankings a little deeper sometimes and look at the preseason rankings. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how a team like Auburn, who under Hugh Freeze has not done anything, and frankly, since Cam Newton left, hasn't done a whole ton. And they're sitting ahead of teams like Illinois and Indiana. Like, Indiana made the playoff last year. Illinois is a serious contender to make the playoff this year. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Even Michigan last year, they had a down year. They beat Alabama. And you're going to rank them below Auburn? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
You came in hot there. No, I loved it.
Sorry, computers.
No, I loved it. I thought that was great. It's almost like half of the top 20 is SEC teams. I feel like we've officially joined the war over the past 8 months of the SEC media versus everybody else who's just being logical about some things. And some of this is because we're fresh off of the SEC spring meetings, which they just talk during their spring meetings. The Big Ten does not. And so it does seem like the SEC has taken up a lot of airspace now. But it is...
Even though both conferences want the same thing.
Both conferences want the exact same thing. It's just one conference allows the other conference to complain about it. It's just, I agree with you. We're setting the bad tone already for how this is going to, because this is going to happen as an AP voter. There are going to be people who are going to take in this metric. They're going to take in the SP Plus metric. They're going to take in Phil Steele's magazine that's coming out this week. They're going to take in all these different things. And if it feels like everything you're reading and trying to evaluate outside of, while also trying to make sure you're not hyping your own team that you cover too much, while also not pulling them down because you're trying to not hype them up too much. You're taking all these variables and all of a sudden you're hearing SEC, 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 SEC. And then all of a sudden we've got 12 SEC teams in the top 25. And at the end of the year, Kirby Smart's going, no conference is tougher than playing a road game. against a 4-3 Vanderbilt. You don't know how hard that is to do. And then Greg Sankey's walking around upset. This is what's happening, though. And again, the Big Ten's doing this as well, right? We see coaches do this, too. The Big Ten constantly talks about the fact that you have to play 9 conference games. So it's not just the SEC doing it. It's just the SEC does it more often, so you hear about it more often, while the Big Ten seems to do it in a more subtle way. I think this summer at these media days is going to be very intriguing because you're right. There's the whole playoff model proposal that's going around right now for how they're going to change some things. We haven't really heard Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, really kind of go to bat and do what Greg Sankey's been trying to do for the last couple of years and essentially just wave the flag for his conference. That's all he's doing. We talk about it, we joke about it, but that's all he's doing is waving the flag for his conference. I do wonder if we start to see Tony Petitti do that a little bit more often going forward. I do have one more question about this, though, because we turned this into an anti-SEC rant, because that's what, listen, we're going to do that sometimes. The Big Ten has 4 teams in the top 20. Ohio State at 4, Penn State at 5, Oregon at 6, and Michigan at 17. Ohio State's got to play number 5 and number 17 during this year. They also have to play number 1 on its regular season schedule to open up the season. There is a hypothetical chance that I think it's, and when we do the Big Ten media preseason poll this summer, I do wonder if a lot of teams pick this. A lot of people pick this Oregon-Ohio State Big Ten championship game, or Penn State-Oregon, Penn State-Ohio State, but Oregon-Ohio State has a Big Ten championship game. There is a world where Ohio State plays 5 of the top 20. What does that say about Ohio State's 2025 schedule and their road to repeating for national championship?
Yeah, I mean, in that same metric, they do have the 18th toughest, strength of schedule, and
right.
and like you said, you add in the potential of playing Oregon, it could only get tougher. So it's going to be a tough journey for Ohio State, from the jump with Texas being the first game on the schedule. Like there's a lot of guys on this roster that are going to have to grow up in real time, right? And especially it starts with whoever the starting quarterback is, whether it's Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kienholz. They're going to be starting their first career game when they go up against Texas, who's number 1 in this ranking. So Ohio State's going to have to grow up in real time and grow up fast, and it's going to be a challenge. It's the type of challenge where, Ohio State, like they did last year at 10-2, can probably still pretty easily make the 12-team playoff. Obviously we're assuming that one of those 2 losses is to these teams that we're talking about, right? Like it's not like they're dropping a game against Minnesota or something like that. So if Ohio State grows up in real time and takes care of business in at least a couple of these games, they're going to be in a pretty good spot, but it's going to be a tough test. This is a team that is going to, enter August 30th, very young and inexperienced. And then we're going to get to the playoff. We're going to say, yeah, they're young on paper, but they've been through a ton because this is not an easy regular season schedule.
I like that. Grow up fast. And it's got some benchmarks in it. We're going to see where they're at in that maturation process between now and potentially getting to the national championship game next January. It's going to be an interesting story to tell. Get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial. This is a good time to get it right now because there's recruiting things going on, whether it's official visits or it's camps that happen this week as well. And we'll be bringing you all that information and more. Ohio State ranked 4th in the FPI rankings. That's Stefan. I'm Steven. This was a short little video version of Buckeye Talk. Go subscribe to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. If you want longer versions of us chanting anti-SEC, not really. We don't do that often, but really talking about Ohio State in an in-depth way. Talk to you guys later.